Hey, this is Brian Lawrence with episode number 3 of Selling Bliss Podcast, and I'm super excited to have Marcus Chan with me. And Marcus is a sales influencer, top-rated speaker and sales trainer, and most recently, best-selling author. Marcus, my man, welcome. How you doing?
Brian, I'm so happy. I'm pumped to be here, and I'm also pumped that we have 2 real backgrounds behind us too, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
So I'm pumped. We're gonna have some fun today.
We're
I promise.
Gonna have a great time.
Yeah.
So you just came out just recently with 6-figure sales secrets, and it's already hit the bestseller list. Tell us a little bit about the book, and also like what inspired you to drop all your knowledge in a book and put it out there.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty cool, right? And I feel super humbled because when the book came out, we hit the Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling list in the first week, which is pretty crazy. And it's very humbling because I think for the background of this book, of why I even wrote it, I really wrote it for past Marcus, if you will. I didn't do it for anybody else. And what I mean by that is when I started in sales, I wasn't a born salesperson. We were just talking about this before this. Like, I wasn't a person who thought I'd be good at sales. I didn't really think I'd be able to do anything what I'm doing today, because when I started first, frankly, I almost quit sales. I almost gave up. It was in the last recession, and I really struggled because I had no playbook. I had no trade. I didn't know what I was doing. And over time, eventually I figured out, had some pretty cool success, which is great. But 15 years ago, I would not picture where I am today. And I wanted to be able to create a playbook, something that a sales manager could give to their team, or something that someone wanted to break into sales or was already really good at sales, but they want to tighten the screws up to be able to grab and reference nonstop. And that's what I wrote. And I took my 15 plus years of mistakes, my trials, my tribulations, everything I'd failed horribly at, and I condensed it down to something that's very easy to read so you can read it and go implement immediately. But also, more importantly, the way I structured the book was very intentional, where it's not all tactical, where it's really like a textbook from school. I incorporate many stories as well, so you can see the context behind the situation, so you can use it as a skeleton. So that way, when you add yourself, the muscle, it becomes something really powerful. So you're not selling the Marcus way. You're not selling because of book. You're selling because you're able to take a framework and make it part of you. And that's what makes you really, really great. And that's why I wrote the book.
Man, that's awesome. And so maybe share with folks a little bit, because just how you got into sales, and you talk about it in the book. Like, your background is, it's a one that I imagine left you feeling really motivated, because I'm an only child of a single mom. We didn't grow up with a whole lot, and that's kind of your background as well. Would you mind sharing a little bit of and how that motivates you today?
Oh, 100%. So I grew up really poor. My parents immigrated from Taiwan and China, and my dad actually came here because he actually was put in a re-education camp during the Cultural Revolution in the 60s. So they were re-indoctrinating people. So he eventually escaped from his camp with absolutely nothing. He eventually made it to America with absolutely nothing. So when he started to build a family, this is in the early 80s, we didn't really have much. And they were there first. Obviously, they had me when I was in America, and then they had a restaurant. So growing up, I saw how little money we had, how little of anything we had, but I saw how hard my parents would work. And I grew up working at my parents' restaurant at the age of 5. So growing up, like, other kids are cool, fun, after school activities, I'm at the restaurant helping out, doing whatever I could at the age of 5 and up. And you learn so much at that point. And I remember over time, I saw my parents over time be able to build some level of success, a little bit of financial stability over probably at least a decade over time. And I remember fast forward till I was about 17 or 18, and I didn't know what I wanted to do in life, right? Like, my parents, if you're an Asian, you get this, but my parents were saying, hey, go be a doctor, a lawyer, accountant.
Doctor, lawyer, yeah.
Right. And I'm like, I don't want to do any of those things. In fact, I'm like, I love drawing. I was really, really creative as a kid. And I'm like, maybe I want to be an artist. And they're like, you can't be an artist. Like, we came here from like China and Taiwan. We left everyone behind. You can't go do something like that. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, maybe I'll be an architect. Right. And I actually had my whole application filled out, did all the drawings. And then I did a job shadow like probably the summer before I graduated. And I realized I hated it. I wanted nothing to do with architecture. So if you're an architect listening, then sorry about that. So anyways, I just went in undeclared. I remember like literally that summer, and it was like we had done a lot of festivals. My parents had a food booth, and we would work these festivals like 15 to 18 hour days on our feet outside in front of a hot stove, cooking and serving food to hundreds of thousands of people. And we would be just destroying our bodies because we're working nonstop. And I remember it's 1 a.m. on a Sunday. We're in literally the garage scrubbing pots and pans, as industrial looking pans I have in the garage, preparing for the next day. And I'm like looking super sour, and my dad's like, why are you so mad? And I'm like, I hate this. Yeah. I'm like, we work our tail off. The amount of money we make is not only that much. Like, we're working super hard. I'm exhausted. I want to go out. I'm 18 years old. I want to go party. I want to go hang out
with my buddies.
Friends. Yeah. I don't be scrubbing pots and pans at 1 in the morning. And my dad's like, it's pretty stoic about it. And I'm like, one day I'm going to learn how to make money with my brain. One day I will learn how to make money without having to do physical work. He's like, it's great. That's why I go to college, etc. I'm like, cool. So here's the thing. I still had no idea what I was going to do, right? So eventually go to college, end up getting like a business degree in Chinese. Still don't know what I want to do. When I was going through school, I did different things. I worked with my parents for a while, for part of it. I sold speedos at a retail store because I used to be a competitive swimmer, right? And then I didn't even think about B2B sales until 2005. And I did an internship with a company called Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Most people have heard of it. Enterprise Holdings now. They love to hire college kids who are really gung-ho, hungry, work hard, really gritty. That's where I came from. And I started as an intern for them for the summer. And that was really interesting experience because that was more retail sales and like selling insurance, etc., which is pretty interesting how to learn how to sell. Did that for a couple summers, had some pretty cool success, won like intern of the year a couple years in a row. That was cool. And then I graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I remember going to literally the career fair, and I went and I started talking to all these companies. I started going and interviewing all these companies. And I was really fortunate. I actually had a number of different offers. Now at this time, the Enterprise, they actually had a brand new B2B truck division that was starting up that summer. Yep. And the director who was overseeing everything, he had hired me as an intern. So he came and like, hey, Mark, you should come work with me, help me build this up. It's basically, we have no customers. It's B2B sales. You got to knock on doors, generate business. There's no book of business. We don't know if we have product market fit.
Starting from scratch. There's no playbook. Yeah.
There's absolutely no playbook, right?
Yep.
But we're bleeding in the red from day one. Right. And I'm like, okay, interesting, right? And it's funny because I turned out actually so I actually ended up having 5 job offers. They ranged from $29,500 base salary up to like $60K base salary. They varied from all types, banking, financial, whatever. And I turned out all of them, went for the $29,500 base salary, and they was to go work for that director in B2B sales. And my parents were like, what the heck are you doing?
What are you doing?
What? Like, you work so hard, you can take the smallest offer. What is wrong with you? And I'm like, it's your job to learn some skills. It's really cool. I can get promoted, etc.
Marcus, this is why we told you to concentrate on math, so you would understand 60 is a lot more than 29.5. Right?
Like, that's why I didn't do well in math. So anyways, that was my first dive into it. And then when I got into it, that's when I realized how hard it was. And what B2B sales really, really was. When you have to do like complete cold outbound and there's no marketing, there's no PMF, there's no ICP. It's go out there, every door, every floor, you walk out there. You learn pretty quickly how to become very good at your game. Otherwise, you will fall apart, especially during the recession. So that was kind of how I got into sales. Now, fortunately, I eventually figured it out and had success. But at the time, I still wasn't willing to admit I was in B2B sales for probably the longest time.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, so I went to UC Santa Barbara, and beautiful college right there on the beach, super condensed. And so I did not get my driver's license until after college. And the downside to that was I was applying at Enterprise, and they were going to make me an offer. And then they're like, and of course you've had your license for 6 months. I'm like, no, I've had it for like 6 weeks. And so I didn't get the job at Enterprise, which bummed me out because they have, I will say that's one of those companies, man, if I get a chance to hire someone from Enterprise, I do it because they've turned out some really well-trained people. And so much like you in the restaurant business. So my first job out of college, the thing I had gone precisely to college not to do was work in fast food. So I was a management trainee for Pepsi assigned to Taco Bell. So I was working in a Taco Bell. And I'll tell you, man, I spent a lot of time making tacos and sitting there thinking about where did I go wrong and how do I get out of this? And what should I be doing instead with my life? And that's part of what led me to sales. So once you got into it, once you're there and you're running in the red, there's no playbook. What did you start to figure out, and what helped make you successful in sales?
Yeah, so I think the first off, I had no real strategy, right? So like day one, I went to my boss and said, what do I do? Like, I'm like a lost puppy, right? I have no direction. I don't know what to do. So he gives me a playbook written by people who had never done the job before, right? I'm just like, okay, this is not gonna work, right?
Yep.
And then he's like, all right, I want you to go knock on doors. I'm like, okay, like, sure. Like, what does that mean? What do I do? He's like, so he gave me a stack of his business cards because mine hadn't even been ordered yet. And he's like, I want you to go outside.
A little white out, little like,
he's like, just cross out your name, right?
Cross out your name and put yours.
Right.
All good.
Right. Yeah. So he's like, go outside, go right, and don't come back until you go to at least 30 businesses. I'm like, all right. So I walked out the door. I'm literally pounding pavement, and I get to 30, and I'm like, nothing's happened yet. Like, I didn't book a meeting. I didn't generate any interest. I didn't close a deal. I'm like, let me keep going. So like, I'm not going to come back until I close something. I'll walk in over 60 businesses that day. I'm exhausted by foot. No interest, nothing. I'm like, oh my God. I go back to my boss that night. I'm like, this is hard. Like, what do I do next? He's like, do it again tomorrow. I'm like, all right. Okay.
How do I get, yeah.
So next day I did it again. Again.
Same. How were the results? Did you get a lot better on day 2?
No, I did not. I absolutely did not. In fact, I went the second day I walked into over 120 businesses in 2 days, 0 interest, 0 book meetings, 0 everything. Businesses were shut down. This is the recession is already hitting.
Right.
People were boarding up buildings. Like, why are you here? Right. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, exactly. Right. So then day 3, I'm like, boss, what do you do? He's like, call them. I'm like, what? Call them on a cold call. I'm like, all right. I call every single one that day. Same result.
Nothing.
Go back to him. Like, what do I do? He's like, call them again. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I call again the next day. Again,
and at this point, maybe you're starting
stressed.
to think this guy does not have the magic formula yet, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it was like, first, it was like, I don't believe my boss. I don't believe myself. It's because of bad trading. It's because of the economy. It's because everyone's got better territory. It's because of a bigger territory. It's because of X, Y, Z. It was all these excuses I had in my mind.
Tons of pre-built excuses right there for you. Yep.
Oh yeah. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit because eventually like people, like I wasn't closing any deals but probably one of my first big ahas, and it was always because of me. It was because of someone who's already doing the job better than me. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very simple. I realized I was going after everyone, and that didn't make any sense. I didn't understand the concept of an ICP.
Yep.
I didn't understand the concept of like, because that was ideal customer profile. That wasn't a thing. I didn't know what that was. It was like, I could just walk into businesses, maybe they'll buy, right? Like maybe one point they'll buy. I don't know. Like they're gonna maybe want to lease a vehicle from us, a box truck, a pickup truck or something. Or like, that's going to make sense. No, that's not how it works. So I had called up another top rep in another like state. They've been doing it for a lot longer than we have in that state. I'm like, hey, like, how are you like booking meetings? And her answer is actually really simple. It was like, oh, I just like, if I see they have vehicles, they probably have a need. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, they have a box truck or a stake bed or a cargo van or a pickup truck. Stuff breaks. They probably need to maintain themselves. And if it looks old, they probably potentially need an upgrade. I'm like, huh. Like, that seems almost too simple. Like, that's interesting. Wait, they already have a need. I just need to show them why our solution's better. I'm like, interesting. That's an aha, right? And that was like the first thing, right? And then you start learning over time how to actually like better target, improve your messaging, how to ask more questions, better questions, how to sell competitively, all these things I started learning over time, right? But it was one of those things where it was like each time I would fail, I would learn something new.
Yep.
I also, probably one of the most important lessons out of all those things was I learned how to ask myself better questions. And let me explain exactly what I mean. So early on, I'm making calls, getting my face smashed in, and naturally I'm thinking, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with me? Why they're a jerk? Why they're having a bad day? Why didn't the decision maker answer? It's a lot of self-pity, victimization questions.
Yep.
And then this sounds really cheesy, but I stumbled across a Tony Robbins book. And what he said in there was, if you don't like the answer, ask a better question. I'm like, huh, that's it. I need to ask some better questions. So I get a really bad cold call. Instead of going through my same bad behavioral mental models and patterns, I start asking different questions. I'm like, hey, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I do differently? How can I improve this? How can I get a better desired result? How can I improve my conversion ratio on here? What can I do differently from a tonality perspective? What can I say differently? How can I better handle that objection? How can I prepare for the call? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of blaming everyone else and being a victim, I was taking ownership.
Yeah. And
you start applying to everything in your whole process, really your whole life. You start thinking very differently. You stop accepting excuses on why you can't get what you want to get. And when you stop accepting excuses, you start seeking solutions. And only when you can make that mental shift are you able to actually improve.
Yeah. And you hit on something. And so one of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that's the entire concept of for your career and for your life. You can sit there and you can blame other people, or you can look internally and look in the mirror and, whether it's Tony Robbins or, some of the other books I know you and I have both read, like Zig Ziglar and the things you can do, some of the tried but true type of things. And going back to the ideal customer profile, one of the things I loved that you talked about in the book is if you could have the greatest product, and you could also have, you could nail all the parts of your sales process. You're great at opening, you're doing amazing discovery, and you can close like nobody else, but you equated it to, hey, if I'm selling steaks to a vegan, I'm not going to have a lot of success. So talk a little bit more about like how much time do you spend and figuring out that ideal customer profile, and why is that your starting point?
So I'm a firm believer we should always begin with the end in mind, right? Like the cool part is if you work for a company that has like happy customers, case studies, customer success, examples like that, you kind of have some of that kind of figured out already for you, right? So when you begin with the end in mind, then you can repeat success. Like it's so much easier to hit a target if you actually can see the target. But it's really frustrating if you can't see a target, you're trying to sell to them. That makes it really, really hard. And early on, that was the issue I was going after. I was like, I'm not even joking. I literally was walking into businesses that had no business walking into. Like I'm literally trying to find businesses that have at least 5 to 10 minimum commercial vehicles, box trucks, pickups, the moving products. Like I literally was cold calling even like a State Farm office. It's like one agent sitting there, right? Like in wearing a red shirt. Like I'm going places like that because I'm like going everywhere. I'm like, it's a numbers game. No. Because ultimately, when you can clearly identify who you're going after, then it becomes much easier to understand the messaging, understand their wants, needs, desires, to be able to really see where their head is at. And I always picture, and I mentioned this in the book, I call it the whisper test. Like with your ideal customer profile, you want to be able to pass what's called the whisper test. And the whisper test is really, really simple, right? So I want you to imagine if your perfect prospect, right, your ideal customer profile is at dinner with their spouse. It's a romantic dinner. It's a very nice high-end restaurant. They're having an incredible time eating. And you go up to your ICP and you whisper in the ear, I know your deepest, darkest fears, which are X. I know you secretly are scared of X. I know you truly desire X. And you're able to basically say out loud what's already on their mind they're scared to say. So they feel heard. And then you say, I have a solution to solve all that. Would you be open to chat for a few minutes? And they say, sounds great. And they whisk away from their spouse and they're like, tell me more.
You've ruined date night, but
I ruined date night, but I've added an opportunity
the possibilities,
funnel, right? The possibility, right? So but when you understand your ICP to that level, it's amazing. And that's why I think a lot of times with salespeople, whether it's a BDR or it's an AE and they're outbounding a C-level exec, when you're able to speak at their level because you understand them so well, they're just more open to have a conversation. But they think you're just like some random rep in a call center making some random list at a robo-dialer.
Reading my script.
Reading your script. Like they're not going to give you the time of day. Like sales can be one of the highest paying jobs in the world, one of the lowest paying jobs in the world based on your skill set and execution. So when you understand that, it's like, okay, I can control preparation. I can know my ICP. I can control the things that I do. I can't always control how they react, but I can control how I respond. So we started thinking this way, you start controlling things like the ICP and targeting, how you write your messaging, what you say, how you prepare for those calls, how you control the sales process, how you run the script. You start controlling every possible piece so you increase your win rate across the board.
Yep. And you called your book about 6 figures. And so like you were making 29.5. I got to tell you that first job, I wasn't even making that, man. That would have been a step up for me. So
I know, I was crushing life.
But the thought of, man, I could make 6 figures, like that was huge. What does that kind of symbolize for you? And why do you like focus on that? Would you mind talking a little bit about that part?
Totally. So it's interesting, right? It's like there's so many different interpretations of how you want to interpret 6 figures, right? It could be first income, et cetera. It could be deal size, whatever, right? For some reason, I don't know if I don't think I was alone here, but I remember being a college grad, right? Or even before that, and you kind of put in your mind, like there's certain like milestone tiers in life that you want to be able to hit, or you think is hard. Like number 1 is 6 figures. You're like, I want to hit 100K. Like now, reality is like once you hit, you kind of realize like actually, if I live in an expensive city, it's actually not that much.
It goes quick. Taxes, rent.
Exactly, right? But when your cost of living is so low at that time, you're like not making any money. You're being paid. Like I was getting paid $9 an hour as an intern. 6 figures is like holy cow, like I'm going to be rich, right? So it was symbolic, especially at the time, right? And I remember my boss was about 45 years old at the time when I graduated college, and he was making about $60,000 a year. So I said to myself, I'm like, okay, like if I could be making at least $100,000 by 30, I'll probably live in a pretty good life. I'll be doing pretty well for myself, right? So it became this like symbolic thing. And that's why when I talk about 6-figure sales secrets, that became like hooked a lot of people, because I think a lot of people that when they're in sales, like they want to get to that point right now. And I would say if you're in SaaS sales, sometimes your base salary is just by itself is already more than that, even if in some of these entry level roles, right? So it becomes something different. So I think it's like the number itself is more symbolic of what it could mean to someone, which is financial stability, that life you can live, the freedom you can have, the choice you can have. And then once you get to that point, then you start realizing, okay, I'm going to move the number up to $250,000, $500K, $1 million plus, and you start increasing it over time to a number that's going to help you fulfill what you want to fulfill in life.
Yeah. And the foundation of that, contrary to what your parents might have thought early on, is that's all foundationally math. That is the math of sales. And that's one of the things you talk about in the book, is looking at your ratios and things like that. And I'll tell you, when I hire people, that's my starting point. And it's one of the ways I kind of suss out candidates, and asking the same question of like, oh, tell me about what your quota looked like. Great. How did you make that? Hey, what's your average deal size? What's your conversion rate? And I'll tell you, the good reps, they know that stuff.
Oh, 100%.
And then the ones who've got a lot of fluff, and they're the ones who've had 7 jobs in the last 5 years. Correct. I find when you dig in, it's like, man, your math just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So tell me, when you think about the funnel and you think about, building to those 6 figures, how do you approach the math, and how do you utilize math in the sales process for the funnel and the rest of it?
Yeah. So I love this type of stuff. So I think the first piece is like, let's just say if you want to reverse engineer your income. So you start off with number one, begin with the end in mind. So how much do you want to earn? Let's just call $150,000, right? If you know it's $150,000, first off, take your base, back it out. All right. So for simple math, because I'm not good at mental math, let's just say it's $50,000 your base. Right. So that means you need to generate at least $100,000 in commissions and bonuses. Now, if you want to get like super granular, you can get super crazy with like how your accelerators, decelerators work, etc. Right? Sure. I like to go very, very simple. So, because you always want to have an idea about where you want to go to. Let's say, for example, let me back up. You want to find out how much do you earn on average for an average deal. That'll give you an idea. So let's just say, for example, you average, for simple math, you average $2,000 per deal closed. Okay. So if you need to generate $100,000 in commissions and bonuses, you take that, divide by 2,000, that's like 50 deals. So I got to close 50 deals this year. Okay. So now we're getting a little bit closer. All right, cool. So now you want to cover, all right, so if I need to close 50 deals, well, how many discovery calls do I need to have in my pipeline, or how many deals do I have in my pipeline, so that you need to know your closing ratio. So let's just say, for example, if you know your closing ratio to be 25% for simple math, that means you need 4 times 50, you need 200 discovery calls in your funnel. Right? You need 200 opportunities in your funnel at all times, right? Now, if you want to get a little more crazy, you start adding, what's my show up rate? Let's just say, for example, I have a okay show up rate. Let's just say it's 75%. So now you need to offset that. So where the math is, maybe it's like, now you need to be at 250 discovery calls set. Right. So they can take 250 discovery calls, and you break that. How many working weeks are you going to work this year? All right. So you start going, so let's say, for example, let's see, 250 divided by 48, whatever that math breaks it down to. Now you know that's how many calls you need to have every single week, right? And then you go even more granular. All right, cool. How many calls do I need to make to generate that many booked meetings each week? All right. And you start reversing this math, and suddenly you realize, and whatever those numbers end up breaking down to, let's just say it's like, oh, cool, I just need to make like 30 like targeted calls every day. That is way more palatable to go after 30 calls a day versus I need to generate 150K in income this year. I don't know how to get there.
I got $1 million quota. How am I going to handle that?
100%.
You get down with like, hey, I need 1 meeting per day. That feels a lot more digestible, right?
100%. 100%. And the cool part is like, you can do the same thing with enterprise deals too. People just don't, it's like, yes, it won't be like that nitty gritty, but it's like, you can just still do the same thing. It's like, how many discovery calls do you need to run in a month, right? Do you need to run 20 enterprise discovery calls in a month? It's the same. You can run the same concept and build a buffer, right? And then you start realizing over time is like, what levers can I really improve? So let's say, for example, there's really 3 core things you can really focus on, right? I can either have more meetings, which is not always the right strategy. I can improve my closing ratio, improve my deal size. Oh, interesting. Well, the ones that have exponential impact to your income are going to be closing ratio and deal size. Right. So how can I either, number one, improve my closing ratio, or number 2, improve my deal size? And deal size can improve so many ways. Can I sell more value? Can I increase my price? Can I add more products and services? Can I upsell after? Can I land and expand? Can I go after larger opportunities? There's so many ways to print money if you actually know your sales math.
And what do you find is the correlation between top performing reps and that ability to do math and analyze and understand? Do you find many who are successful without doing that, or do you think that's kind of a prereq for being successful in sales?
That's a really good question, right? Because I don't think anything's ever like binary, like one way or the other. Because there are
always outliers, right?
There's always outliers, right? I just find those who have predictable, consistent success are systematic in how they target and how they process everything across the board. So for example, I carried a quota for 13 years. I hit and exceeded my quota 13 years in a row. 100 to 250% every single year. It wasn't by accident. It was because I predictably worked my numbers every single year, and I built buffers in to offset things that are outside my control. And when you start thinking this way, you just increase your win rate is all you do, right? Like it's like, I could have bad years for sure, right? I had bad months, I had bad quarters, but if I run the math and I'm consistent in execution, it's gonna be pretty good. And I think about it, it's right. It's so much like, it's like trying to work out and be in great shape, right? Like if you're pretty consistent for the most part and you have a couple off days or weeks, you'll still be in pretty good shape. Like you'll be totally fine. But if you don't know your numbers, you don't know where you at and where you want to go, it's really hard to improve. It's no different than if you want to improve lowering your blood pressure to improve anything. Like I hate to say it, but it's like what gets measured gets improved. That's simple. I'm very simple that way.
Absolutely. And in addition to the book, you've built this really cool community, and you've got a bunch of like-minded salespeople who are all striving. But talk a little bit about that and what you built there.
Yeah, really cool. So what's interesting is, so my current business right now, it's pretty simple, right? So I work directly with B2B sales professionals, help them earn an additional $50,000 to $100,000 more in commissions and bonuses every single year. In about a little less than 3 years' time, we have brought in over 500 clients into our program, right? And that's not my free community either, right? And that's been pretty cool. And the thing is like what it is right now actually started as a side hustle. Right. And, you know, I was doing what you were doing, running a big org, right? Maybe my team was smaller. I had about 110 employees. We did multiple 9 figures a year. It was a cool business, right? And I did for many, many years, a lot of fun. And I remember in 16, I just got promoted to this role where I went from running a direct sales team of about 20 people to now a sales org of 85 people at the time. And I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. And I didn't really think much about this, but at the time, people were like, hey, Marcus, you should write like a book, man. I'm like, about what? They're like, dude, you've been in your corporate life for like 8 years now, and you've been promoted like 10 times in that time. I'm like, oh, I mean, and I'm only for 2 companies. I'm like, I guess I just like work hard and stuff. Like, yes. Like, they're like, no, it's beyond that. Like, you need to write a book. I'm like, that sounds stupid. I'll never write a book. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, you know what we'll do is I'll write an ebook. And this is before everyone and the mother had ebooks. And I'm like, okay. So I bought a course, an online course, which was pretty new at the time, learned how to do it, and started monetizing an online course or online a PDF like people could just buy automatically. I'm like, and I made $9 my first day. I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. And then from there, I'm like, that's cool, right? I'm like, I want something more impact. And that was more about like how to get promoted. Then I'm like, okay, what next? And I'm like, what do people ask me a lot of questions about? I'm like, well, a lot of sales questions, like stuff that that was common knowledge and people would know. I get a lot of questions about, which makes sense because of my role, etc. I'm like, I should build a program for that. So I'm like, and online courses weren't as big back then because now everyone and their mother has one. So back then that wasn't a thing. So I bought a different program. I learned how to build one, how to build and automate everything. And it took me 2 years. At this time, I was traveling about 100 nights a year in a hotel, right? And 80 plus hours a week is nonstop, flying everywhere. It was crazy. My schedule was crazy. So my free time, I started building and recording an online course. And I remember I launched it in January 2019. And I remember thinking like, I had a very small emails, maybe like a couple hundred people. And I just emailed it out. I'm like, oh man, what a waste of all my energy the last 2 years. Rolled it out, woke up, made 2K overnight. I'm like, oh my gosh. Damn. $2,000 strangers, right? I'm like, I wasn't posting on LinkedIn. I had maybe an Instagram follow with random people from posting motivational quotes. I'm like, this is interesting. I'm like, that's pretty neat. Now, at this time, like, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like, I was like, no, I don't want anything to do with that because I saw my parents as entrepreneurs. But you get to this point, it was a struggle, right? But you get to this point in life where you're like, what's next? I'm making plenty of money, doing really, really well. And I'm like, but I wanted more impact. Right. And even though I was one of the top directors of the company and had not just from my org, but also like I had a lot of influence. Like I'm still currently in the training videos at the corporate. Like literally thousands of reps see me still at that company. I hadn't been in for 3 years, right? So I'm still in a ton of training videos. And it was interesting. I'm like, this is a great way to impact more people. Like I can impact more people. And the kind of cool part, and I was kind of thinking about it, but then like I started getting these emails from like people that bought the program I never heard from before. I never heard, I don't know who they were. They're like, oh my God, I just got this result. I'm like, oh wow. It was like proof of concept. It was like proof that even what I did in a different industry, we worked in other industries. And then I started getting coaching requests. It kind of started building from there. And then I'm like, okay, this is a huge opportunity. I can just I can have a greater impact and create this whole life I want. I don't even need to work anymore, right? I'm like, what should I do? I'm like, I should go all in. Now, I was strategic. I want to time it out because I had my President's Club trip in a few months. I want my free trip.
Yeah.
I had a bunch
You
of
worked
stock.
hard. You worked hard.
I
You
want my
got,
free trip, right?
yeah.
I had a bunch of stock was going to invest. I went to earnings call and I wanted to cash out after. So I waited for all things to happen. And then I went all in. And then I started building. And I started building this community. I started like going like all out. And I started like, I went heavy on posting, right? And just started investing into other programs. And I started building this community of B2B salespeople that I could help directly. And what's interesting is even like my core product has changed over time. Like since that original course I made, I've done 6 complete revisions of the whole program, right? To maximize results. And it's been absolutely insane. So because of that, it's like I started doing that. I started going all in on like marketing and everything else. Now, fortunately, because of my background, I grew up in a startup, I realized how important it was to actually learn how to market because we had no marketing team. So I started doing that immediately. I'm like, cool. I'm like, this is like my cadence. Like every day I'm gonna do this and this and this. I'm gonna write this many words, create this much content, create this many videos, and I was systematic in my execution for the top of the funnel. Because I'm like, I can leverage code to explode the business.
Yep.
So I went heavy I still go heavy, but I was going super heavy, especially the first 90 to 100 days. Like no joke, for the first probably 6 months, every single day, I sent out 30 to 50 video messages, custom video messages, right? To build up, because I knew once I left my prior life, nobody cared who I was and what I've done before. So I need to rebuild everything. So I started going nuts. And I think like that year, that was a year like I went heavy for like 3-4 months. And then LinkedIn reached out to me. They're like, hey, they won't recognize for being a top voice. You have the level of impact. I'm like, oh my God, like that's crazy. Kept going, right? Kept going. Started getting featured in like Market Watch. Yeah, people started reaching out. Opportunities started opening up. The business is like building up. And I'm going absolutely insane. Like the business started to scale and grow into all these things. And it's still just me, right? Like, it's like I'm doing like everything. And then it's been really cool. So you can't reach a cap in terms of like how many clients you can bring on and then what you can do. So I started hiring. I probably waited too long. So in 2021, then I started hiring. Right? Started hiring a couple of virtual assistants to start doing work for me. All my video, because I used to do video editing, marketing, write the copy, sales calls, customer fulfillment,
one man band,
do everything, right? Yeah. And then you start scaling up, and then now we have a small team. I got a couple of VAs. I have a BDR that works for me. I have an AE that works for me, right? Yeah. So we've been scaling up since then, but it's been really cool because you just learn so much, but also because of the way I run the business, because I'm still I'm touching everything because of this small team. Like I can just test what works. I can see what works. I can test a copy that works. I'm still doing it, right? That's the beautiful part. Like I'm still doing everything, right? So
no ivory tower. You're just right there in the mix.
I'm right in the weeds. Like, I mean, even as a sales leader, right? It's like I'm doing call reviews with my team, right? I'm looking at their messaging, we're testing, we're tweaking, I'm trying new things out, I'm testing new marketing, I'm testing all these things out to become better. Because ultimately, the goal is serve more salespeople. And we can't serve more salespeople if we don't excel in what we do. And the reality is to master selling is to serve at the highest level. If you believe in your solution, you believe in your offer, wherever you're at, it's your duty and responsibility to sell them, right? And to run the process effectively so they are able to sell internally if you need to as well. So long tangent, but that's how the community has built and we're still growing as a result.
I think what you just touched on there, I mean, it's the exact idea I had behind calling this podcast Selling Bliss. Because to me, it's twofold. It's one, this vision you paint for people, your customers, and two, just that you're in this place where you believe in the product. And that, I got to imagine for you, man, I'd love to hear like one of the stories of like someone who you helped transform, someone who they were making, 50 or 60K, that's okay. But when you add 100K or more to that's life-changing, man. Do you have some instances of that? Because I got to figure that's part of what motivates you. Is there a story that pops to mind of someone you're like, I helped that person do that? And that's, aside from the money, aside from the accolades, that intrinsic feeling that you helped change the trajectory. Is there something that pops to mind for you?
Oh yeah. So every single day, every single week, we get insane amount of testimonials. It's just like because of the program. So I'll give you an example of one that I'll give you one that happened like last week. So last week I get a message from one of the reps. His name's Kier, great rep. And he'd always done well, right? He'd always done well, but never really broke 6 figures, 80, 90, etc. Did the SDR role, did the AE role, and he started working at a new company called Alma. This is like last year, right? Yeah. And he started working, that's when we started working together. And it was insane because he was a student of the game, the coaching, started implementing literally immediately. Within the first month, so most reps don't close any deals the first month. He closed 6 deals the first month, right? And then fast forward, the second month, he closed like 40 deals, right? Wow. And then the third month, he closed like 66 deals, right? Absolutely insane. And we kind of fast forward a little bit, right? And now it's like he's gone from, in his first year, he went from making about 80, 90K. He'll finish off at 200. He's already hit 253,000 so far this year.
Damn.
So he's pretty much over triple his income. But Here's the best part. I mean, he's number one on his team, but also because now he's made more money, he has freedom. So what he's done is he moved to Medellin, Colombia, right? I'm probably mispronouncing it. He lives in Colombia now. He's like, my money goes so far here. And he also started a side hustle of building a vending machine business, right? So it's like, what happens is like, when I think about like the primary goals of why people do what they want to do, they want either fortune, make more money, fulfillment to be happy, or it's going to be a family. Do something for the family, right? It's like, you can do all these things as well. And also freedom. You can do all these things. That's what he's doing, right? So that's a perfect example. Or I think about someone like Reed. Like Reed was already doing well. Think about 125, 130K, good rep. But here's the thing, jumping to the Bliss was selling, he was grinding his way there. Yeah. Just like, he didn't feel really good. Even though he was like one of the top reps of the company, he didn't really feel good. He's like top 15%. He's like, it just feels kind of sleazy what he was trying to do.
Doing it, but not feeling it, yeah.
Correct. And he struggled with some of the bigger deals of how to maximize opportunities. So as we started working with him, in 2021, he went from 125K to 250K the first year, right? Yep. So over doubled his income, hit one of the top 3 people at 600 plus reps, hit President's Circle, etc. They promoted him. This year, he's on track to make over $800,000 this year, right? Wow. So now he's creating complete freedom from himself, right? So it becomes a wild. But here's the best part. And I asked him, because I always do these student interviews. I'm like, hey man, so like, out of all the cool things that's happened, like what's been the best part? He's like, dude, I just like selling. Yeah. I enjoy it now. Like, I don't stress. I feel confident. It's enjoyable. I'm actually helping these businesses. It's blissful because he understands it's not this like old school sleazy, let me try to convince you. It becomes like a different game. Yeah. But the thing is, like, what a lot of people don't realize is that it's never one big shift, right? It's all of these micro shifts, because sales is a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Because if you understand what those paper cuts are, you can minimize them and you can start improving your game. And if you're consistent with it, you'll improve at a whole new level. And the key is like being able to do these things that like may seem really simple and almost boring, but doing it so consistently that you don't outsmart yourself and you keep doing it. And that's how you start to stand out. And the basic fundamentals of sales, I think people overcomplicate all the time. So that's why I'm like, when I look at these, show the success, people are like, oh, like, what was the magic script you did to close this deal? I'm like, there was no magic script.
There's no magic. Yeah.
There's no magic bullet. It's core fundamentals. You know, like I think about Joe. Joe just sent me a message last week, right? So Joe started this past year in February 2021. His company's got quiet. He always did okay, making about 100K a year, right? Sure. He joined my program. For the first month, he earned back an investment, which is almost a 5-figure investment. He earns it back the first month, right? This year, he's one of the top reps in the company now. He just closed a deal last week that I'll pay him $600,000 in commission. Whew. $600K, just one single deal, right? Yeah. It is almost 10 times larger than the biggest deal in the company, right? Wow. And that's just the land part. The expand part, because they want to add much more stuff on once the first implementation goes through, it'll be millions of dollars. So when you understand, like, selling is not a bad, sleazy thing. It can be really enjoyable, but when you do it right, it feels good because you're actually helping
so much
people.
Better.
You're solving problems. That's what you're really doing.
Absolutely. Man, Marcus, so much great knowledge that you dropped. You put, there's the book, there's LinkedIn, you're putting a ton of great free content out there. But if people want to, go to that next level with you, what are the ways that they can do that? What are the options that you got, man?
Cool. Super simple, right? So first off, I always recommend to people, it's like, if you want to commit to yourself, that's the most important thing, because if you join my program, you will get an ROI if you do exactly as I coach and help you with, right? But if you're not committed to yourself, you're not going to do that, right? So if you're not quite ready yet, go get my book first. Go to closewithchan.com, pay for shipping handle. I'll send to you for free, right? Closewithchan.com. Or if you're ready for the next level, you gather send me a direct message on LinkedIn, which is at Marcus Chan, or you can go to sixfiguresalesacademy.com. Go over there. You can book a time with my team. My team will make sure it's a good fit, because ultimately we have a high success rate. We want to keep it that way by making sure we bring people in that are 100% committed.
So you don't take just anybody?
No, we'll turn people away. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because you know your ICP, right?
I know my ICP. Like, we've had people where it's like they'll come in and their biggest issue isn't actually a sales thing, right? It's like my focus is helping you improve your sales game. So I've had people come in and they don't know their why. Like, they don't know some of these deeper emotional things they have. I'm like, so if you come to this program, yes, we can help you improve your sales game. But if you are unclear about yourself and you actually need probably more like a life coach or something like that, that's gonna be a better fit for you, right? Yeah. Solve that problem first and then come in the program, right? Like, or if people are just dealing with other stuff in their life, it's like sometimes the timing just isn't right. Because my goal, I usually tell them like after they get the result, but I'm like, my goal is they come in and they're like, this is the best investment I've ever made in my life, and I get my ROI back in 30 days. That's like my goal. It doesn't happen every single time. It might be 60 or 90 days, but that's the key. That's the key. This is why we track data. I literally know if they are committed, the average, this is even from like the people that are slow to take action to the people that are fast to take action, is 14 days to first result from the day they start. I know the data. I track everything, right? Yeah. So my goal is to get that shorter and shorter, right? But sometimes people just are slow to move. It is what it is.
Because if it matters, you got to measure it, right?
100%. So that's why it's like, I think it's really important to measure. Like, it's like, you can always tell like who cares about selling the program or their solution for any company and who actually really cares about success and fulfillment. This is why I track the back end of how long it takes. This is why actually we have progress somebody. This is actually why I even rate their increase in their confidence. I had them self-rate and I compare it. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, it looks like on average, they have a 50% increase in sales confidence after 12 weeks. That's very good. So this helps me gauge what else we need to improve to make the program better, because like anything else, you have to always constantly improve the offer to better serve the market.
Keep getting better. And Marcus, I think you and I probably could have spent an entire podcast talking about some of our favorite sales books. And, you mentioned Tony Robbins. You talked about Start With Why, Understand Your Why, which is Simon Sinek. Someone's out there and they're looking for one sales book aside from yours, which that's obvious, the obvious choice. Sure. What's the second choice? What's the second book you would recommend aside from Six-Figure Sales Secrets?
Yeah, cool. I'm going to give a non-sales book because it's going to apply to everything else. It's High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, right? So, because ultimately being really great at sales is a construction, it's a summation of who you are and the habits you create. So if you can create better habits across the board, you're better able to do everything else, because the reality is our inner world or our outer world is a reflection of our inner world. So if you can get that inner world dialed first, it becomes much easier to do everything else. Like the roots determine the fruits. So we have to start with the roots first, become really good. And that's why oftentimes, it's like I always joke, we don't really have sales problem or business problems. We have personal problems that merely bleed into business and sales.
They manifest themselves. Yeah.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. Hey, that is a great note to end this on, Marcus. I want to tell you, man, this is, you've just shared so much. You're so generous with your knowledge and it's such great stuff. And so I just want to take a moment to give you a giant thank you. So thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been awesome.
Hey, it's been my absolute pleasure. Lots of fun. And of course, I'm glad we were able to kind of dive in deep about these things as well. And we realize that when you master selling, it's not just like it's a career thing. It's really a life skill. When you really master selling, it becomes a method, a vehicle to actually create the life that you want by learning how to communicate with other people.
It's what makes it a great profession. All right, man. Thanks for everything you're doing to elevate it.
Thank you.